So we're going to talk in this next video about absolute value and opposites. Remember from 8th grade that absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. So when we talk about the distance a number is from 0, we're talking about looking at something like positive 3 and negative 3. So we're on that number line again. Negative 4, negative 2, 0, 2, and 4. And when we look at that number line, we're talking about the fact that when we look at negative 3 and we look at positive 3, that they both have a distance of 3 units from 0. And when we measure distance, it doesn't matter whether you're going forward or backwards. We just measure 3 miles. Think about the idea of driving to school and driving home. It's the same distance either way, and we don't worry about what direction we're going in. So absolute value is just talking about distance. One of the things that we probably said, and you probably already know this or have it stuck in your head at some point, is that absolute value is always positive. Absolute value is always positive. This is, again, it's that idea of the fact that its distance from here to there is the same as from there to here when we measure it. The second piece of this is all about opposites. And I know, I'm positive, beyond positive, that you are all familiar with seeing this notation. And when you see this notation, I will bet that you read it as negative x. That's the hard habit. This should not say negative x to you. Even though we're in the habit of reading it that way, it shouldn't say that. This should really read as the opposite of the x value, or exactly what it really is, which is negative 1 times the x value. So the opposite of x is how we should be reading this. Opposite of the x value. So let's do a couple of practices. Those are your absolute value bars, those straight up and down bars. So how far is the number 17 from 0? Or what is the absolute value of 17? Hopefully, there's no trouble there. You got 17. What is the absolute value of negative 17? How far is negative 17 from 0? Well, it's also 17 units. So we just write 17. Number 3, when we read this, what's the opposite of the n value when n is equal to 7? The opposite of positive 7 is negative 7. Or negative 1 times 7 is negative 7. This is where the tricky one comes in. Number 4, the opposite of the k value when k is negative 15. The opposite of negative 15 is positive 15. Be very careful. This is a common mistake. 5 and 6 are tricky problems. They go back to those addition and subtraction problems. The absolute value of h, then subtract 4. Remember, even though absolute value bars are not exactly the same, they do have some grouping type issues. So the first thing we always do is show our work of plugging in that negative 10. So the absolute value of negative 10, then subtract 4. The absolute value of negative 10 is positive 10. And when we subtract 4, we should in fact get 6. Number 6 is a trick question. Again, let's fill it in. We fill in that absolute value. We take w out and put the 8 in. So we have negative, or the opposite of the absolute value of 8, minus 12. This is another trick question. We need to take the opposite of the absolute value of 8. We know the absolute value of 8 is 8, and the opposite of 8 is negative 8. I know there's somebody sitting there saying, but Mrs. Sturgeon, you just said absolute value is always positive. You're right, I did, And in this problem, the absolute value is positive. We took the opposite of a positive number, so we have a negative. Negative 8 minus 12. Or if you prefer, negative 8 plus negative 12. Either way, we end up with a negative 20. Remember, subtraction can always become plus the opposite. So negative 20. Those are opposites and absolute values.